Welcome to today's episode of Unapologetic Living. I am excited to have a conversation with a new friend I met through an online course. Her name is Nicky Hilsen. Nicky, welcome.
Thank you. So good to be here.
I'm excited to have you because we shared a conversation first and foremost, and you introduced me to, and I've heard of his works before, but Neville Goddard. And
Yes.
so I got this book and we read
Oh,
it in the morning, and then Your Faith is Your Fortune. And it's just like, whoa, I don't know. It's just like every light bulb in the world has gone off. And I mean, it's so much what I already believe to be true, but golly, he articulates it so well.
hmm
Um, so I'm so glad that,
Neville Goddard is an amazing writer, speaker, and mystic. And I just really appreciate how he has interpreted the Bible through the lens of higher consciousness. And studying his work at this time as we move out of this 2,000-year period of the Piscean age into the Aquarian age, it just feels like it's right on time as we're waking up in awareness and in consciousness. It's just such a beautiful way of um, studying scripture, for sure.
yeah. And, I was raised Methodist and went back and forth and sat in church every Wednesday night and Sunday morning I mean, my parents, they were in it to win it. But there was something I couldn't quite get or embrace but I knew there was something also to it. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, for lack of a better word, I always felt drawn to that there is a higher power. And I just remember also just thinking about the one scripture, the kingdom of heaven is found within. And it was, and that one, I don't know, that one was just really like an or aha moment, that I had the ability to either create a hell or heaven in this human body.
Mhm.
So anyway, um, so I'm going to share a little bit about Nikki with my audience real quick before we get into this conversation. Nikki is an artist, possibilitarian, and lover. She lives in Chicago, Illinois, and she grew up in the performing arts, dancing, singing, and acting all the way through college. She transitioned into the healing arts when she became a licensed massage therapist 14 years ago. She believes there are worlds inside of us. A handful of years ago, Nikki took a deep dive into studying astrology with Deborah Silverman. And now, as an astrologer herself, she loves having conversations and sharing insights through the greater lens of the stars. Our conversation today will talk about the building blocks of the zodiac and then move into how Nikki has an intentionally designed every day of her week using the wisdom of astrology. She's an advocate for everyone to creatively live into all of the signs of the zodiac to maximize full potential, individuals reaching their full potential. And so what I hear from that is I know that is so much more. I'm an Aries,
Mhm.
and I don't, I know, I think Ram fire sign, if I'm correct, and sometimes I might get mixed up. And some of what I've read about the characteristics or traits of an Aries fall true. They lean to be true, but I don't necessarily resonate with all of the characteristic or traits that I've read. And as we were talking before um, we started recording, um, you know, I feel as though I don't necessarily, if well, I have this deep belief that we're all one, and if we're all one, then I must be all of the zodiac signs as well, right? I just maybe resonate or, lean towards, right, having been born under that sign, but that doesn't necessarily, right, identify everything that I am.
That's right. There are 10 planets in astrology and asteroids and all of the different configurations of their relationship. So in the span of the 30 days when you were born and the sun was in a zodiac sign, that is your quote unquote zodiac sign. That's how you know you're in Aries. Um, but all of the other 9 planets were in different signs or the same signs or just in a really unique configuration. So just like you said, we're all one. We're all made up of the same stuff, just organized in a really unique way. And so this is why I love the greater lens of studying the depth of astrology that's bigger than just your sun sign or your zodiac sign, because then you can start to see how this internal structure of how the planets were arranged the moment that you took your first breath has an influence on how you tend to process your experience.
So all of the planets at the exact moment of our birth, in the exact town where we are born, right, have an influence over us. And what does this look like?
Yeah. So have you ever seen your natal chart?
Oh my goodness, I really don't know. I don't know. I've worked with a friend who does human design, and I want to say, I better just answer no to that. Um, I had a friend whose husband, he was a Swami. Is that,
I'm not familiar.
yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. And he might have done something. He looked at charts, but I'm not sure what type of chart.
Yeah. So your natal chart is a pie graph. So for people who don't love science and math, that might be a little intimidating to look at a pie chart that has a bunch of hieroglyphics on it. And but what it really is a snapshot of the sky the moment of your birth. And so you can see where all the 10 planets are in relationship to one another and what zodiac signs they land in and what areas of life they land in. And as you study the full potential within each sign of the zodiac. So you gave, for example, Sun in Aries, and you said, as I've studied a few of those qualities of that sign, I do resonate with some of that. And then other descriptors I don't resonate as much with. Well, even within one sign of the zodiac, when you really study the full spectrum of it, there's really a high and a low potential, and there's a wide range within that one area. So it's really all about how are you showing up in that energy? How are you maximizing its potential? Is it serving you? Is it hindering you? And so that's for you to turn on your observer, which my teacher, Deborah Silverman's, is kind of the whole teaching of the way that she studies applied astrology and teaches it, is that it's about us becoming conscious of the full spectrum of potential within even one area of life, and then asking ourselves, how are we, pardon me, that was my dryer, I'm sorry. How are we showing up in that area of life, and how are we maximizing that potential?
And okay, so we're gonna look at areas of our lives to see where, through the mind of the observer,
Mhm.
right? That observer's mind, um, where uh one we might be, I don't know. I want to say clinging to an idea or a trait or a behavior pattern, or that could be interfering, that may or may not be right. I mean, it almost sounds like it would have to be related to some way, right? An aspect of our um, of when, the day, the time, the hour, the space where we were born astrologically. Is that what you're saying? Like,
Sure. Right? Because there are all these different parts of us, and some parts are louder than others. So
okay,
there are some parts that we identify more with or that we resonate more with. And, and I really see the 12 signs of the zodiac as this divine celestial council of gods, if you will. Just bear with me, okay? I don't mean to make this so like religious, right?
no, no,
But this divine council that is sitting around a round table, right? And so some of them are across the table from one another. Some of them are sitting side by side. Some of them are sitting, 90 degrees apart. And so that creates a different perspective between each of these different parts of ourselves. And for the parts of ourselves that are snuggled up, sitting right next to one another, they might see the world in a pretty similar way. And if you have more of that, you might see the world more in that way. And if you have parts of yourself that are sitting, at a 90-degree angle from each other, well, they're just like kind of looking in different directions, right? So they have different goals or different ideas of how to start something or how to go about something or how to finish something. And if you have parts of yourself that are looking each other square in the face and kind of an opposition and like reflecting one another and trying to find the balance between the two, this is where I find that all of these 10 planets create different voices in our heads, or almost like 10 different voices in our psychology. And some of them see eye to eye and want similar things, and others of them create a bit of tension because they create some friction in the way that they go about processing their experience. So to answer your question, yeah, I think some parts of us we're more resonant with because they're just simply, they've made themselves more known to us. But I think the medicine of studying the overall perspective of astrology is that we can get to know and become familiar with all of the parts of us and then live into their full potential and ultimately make the choice about who we wish to be and how we wish to experience our life.
so when you refer to parts, when you think of parts, what would you define? What, can you give me examples of?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there's a part that our ego identifies with. There's a part that our mental processing identifies with. There's a part of our emotions. There's a part of our fun factor. There's a part of how we love and how we receive love. There's a part of our greater life lessons, kind of the soul contract that we came to this planet with to evolve our soul. There's our soul part. So there's all these different parts of us. There's our dreamy, like fantastical, imaginative part.
Oh, so it reminds me a little bit of, I think it's, I don't know if it's internal family systems
Yeah.
where, and I worked with an EMDR practitioner once where, like the inner child, the
Mhm.
adult self, the teenage part, the critic. I
Mhm.
don't know. I can't remember what else what other parts, but it almost sounds sort of like that.
It is just like that.
Yeah.
So Deborah Silverman teaches astrology that is basically Carl Jung's archetypal psychology,
Okay.
right? So we are talking about the inner mother, the inner father, the inner child, the inner critic, the inner performer. We're talking about all of these, right? And those archetypes show up in the way that we process our thoughts, in the way that we process our emotions, in the way that we take masculine action and like our behaviors, right? So yeah, so it's such a light bulb moment to see the archetypes that are showing up and running the show in different areas of our life. And then waking up to the idea of, oh, do I want this character to run the show in this area of my life? Or does my heart desire for a different character to show up in this way? And that's the medicine that Neville Goddard especially teaches. It's like, who do you say that I am? What are your I am statements?
Right, and which ones do you wanna hang on to, and which ones do you wanna let go of, or integrate, or utilize? I don't wanna say utilize in a different way. I would imagine some of these parts are, I mean, they're all guides, right? Sometimes our best teachers and mentors, um, exhibit the worst traits, right? And behaviors. Sometimes they are our best teachers. So
Hmm.
I don't want to, you know, or even of a way we don't want to be. I mean, I think about uh, teach. So when I student taught, this woman and I, my teacher, my whatever teacher, I forget what they call her title when I student taught, the lead teacher. I mean, I walked out of there knowing exactly what I did not want to integrate into a classroom with children. She was a very good teacher at teaching me how I did not want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to say she was a bad teacher because she
Mm-hmm.
was good at teaching me what I did not want to implement into a classroom. I never taught actually in a classroom. I finished my master's and never taught. But, and it wasn't because of her. I just knew I wasn't going to do it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so these parts, where I guess where I was going are all beneficial in guiding us in some way, even if it's into a new way.
They are, I really believe they are this divine counsel. And like I was saying in the beginning, within each sign of the zodiac, you can just look at one sign and you can study the highs and the lows of that potential, right? So that's where, it gets dangerous to say that one characteristic or one behavioral pattern is so this sign of the zodiac, because that's just not really true, right? And it's just one part of that sign. And yeah, so it's good to become aware. But yeah, we learn through all of it, definitely. They're all our greatest teachers, for sure.
So now if when you're working with a client, uh, and they come to you for, I guess they would have, do you do the chart itself?
I give 3 types of readings. Yes, I start with the natal chart, birth chart, which is the snapshot of the sky the moment that you were born and stays with you your whole life. And then I also give solar return readings, which is a birthday reading. So it's a unique reading for that particular year. And it's when the time of your birth happens on that year's birthday. And
Mm.
it takes a snapshot of the sky in that moment. And there's a new configuration with, you know, the zodiac sign that's on the horizon, and the different areas of life for all of your natal planets show up for the year. And so it can just give you a theme and all these new lessons that, you can become aware of as you integrate the new year's teachings, and just have more of an awareness of, your emotional body moving through the year, and the way that you're processing your thoughts, and what spirit is longing to, wake up in you for the year. So I love those readings. And then the final reading that I give is a synastry reading, where I take 2 natal charts and I lay them on top of one another. And so this is a reading for compatibility between 2 charts of any people, right? So 2 people in any type of relationship. It could be a family relationship, a business relationship, a romantic relationship, a friendship, um, where you can just see where you're both lighting each other up, right? Where the activations are occurring, and where you can really maximize your potential in relationship with one another, and have compassion for each other.
Okay, so now the middle, the second reading you mentioned, the solar
Mhm,
reading.
mhm.
Now, is that something that you do annually? Is that annually? So
It's a birthday reading.
okay, so it's every essentially your birthday. So moving into the
Mhm.
next year. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, and it kind of gives you, I mean, does it does it spell out, hey, this is what you might be going through, or lesson, like specific lessons that you might need to be learning, or like what sort of information might it share, like a little more specifically?
Yeah, it gives you a toolbox so that you can understand the energy that you're working with, regardless of what life brings you for the year. You know, it's helpful to know if you're moving into the year with a highly sensitive emotional body or a kind of detached emotional body, right? So if you have an awareness of that, it doesn't mean that you have to be overly emotional or you have to be totally detached, but you can become conscious of when life happens in the upcoming year, you might tend to react emotionally in this way. But something about turning on the observer is really liberating.
Yeah, so I would say if you turn on the observer and even know that this might be a year for, well, let's say you are um, maybe emotionally sensitive one particular year. I'm wondering if turning on the observer, you're aware of this, are you able to move through the world, right, from a different level of consciousness, despite what the chart may be showing?
I believe yes. And it's like, it's a slow process. It's one thing to be conscious of what life is trying to teach you and trying to help you grow. And it's a totally other thing to actually integrate those life lessons. And that's why Deborah Silverman's applied astrology, right? It's not just the philosophy, and it's definitely not just about predictive astrology to look at, future transits. And I mean, yeah, you do that, but it's not about trying to predict the future. It's about waking up from the inside out so that ultimately you feel like you're living into the fullness of everything that you want to be, not just being tugged and pulled around by, planetary transits that are in opposition with one another and, in a square and all of those fancy words that just mean that they're creating a conversation within you that can feel like life is happening to you. But I don't believe that we are the victims of the world that we see. I really do believe that as we make choices about what we wish to see and what we actually assume and believe to be true, is how we create our reality.
Yeah, when I first read, in even just the beginning of Neville Goddard's book, as I said, I'm only a little bit way through it, but that we truly create our reality. Um, and everything in our life, I mean, in the beginning, what is it? It says like man decrees everything. Man can decree a thing and it will come to pass, right? Man has always decreed that which has appeared in his world. And I think a lot of people might have trouble digesting those words.
Of course.
I can even say that I've had some women already just be turned off by the word man.
Mm.
And yeah, that already, it's like, oh my gosh, we're missing the point already, right? And then like his message. And that we have that much power.
Mm. Mhm. I mean, we're barely into the Aquarian age, right? Like,
Yeah.
we are still at the tail end of the Piscean age. I mean, we're in the Aquarian age now, but there's no like set date for when that full transition happens. And we have to understand that it was a 2,000-year period of the Piscean age. And now the transition into this Aquarian age of really discovering God within, of waking up in consciousness, yeah, it's not a super smooth transition, and people will resist it, of course.
So is that the age of Aquarian, is to embody or learn to embody um our own like sovereign power? Because I mean, is that one of the feature traits or characteristics of the Aquarian age? As I said, I know I'm an Aries.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't even know that much about the ages. Um,
Yeah. So,
and you read different things out there, and I remember reading once, oh my goodness, that things get worse before they get worse before they get better. And I read mixed perceptions of the Aquarian age.
Mhm. So Alice O'Howell, I highly recommend to anyone listening to Google, YouTube, Alice O'Howell, and watch her like 30-minute video. She only has a couple of videos on YouTube, but there's one where, she's a Carl Jung analyst and an astrologer, and she talks about these different ages. I'm trying to remember the name, the name of the video. There's only two Alice O'Howell videos. You should probably watch both of them. But in one of them, she really talks about astrology being the lens through which we process our experience. And near the end of the conversation, she goes through the ages, which was probably the first time that I really heard them described so well. But she goes all the way back to the age of Taurus, even, where like this was the start of agriculture. And like material possessions and people actually owning land and owning things. Um, and then so that was a 2000-year or so cycle. And then moving into the age of Aries, which was all about the acquiring of the ego. And moving from then into the age of Pisces, I'll let Alice O'Howell break this down for you much better than I possibly will. But after the age of acquiring the ego, which was the age of Aries, moving into the age of Pisces, with the symbol of the crucifixion,
Mhm.
it's really about the sacrifice of the ego.
Mhm.
And it's not that the ego has to die, it's that the ego has to be sacrificed so that it can become devoted to something greater, so that it can be of service. And now moving from the age of Pisces, where now the ego has been sacrificed, without an ego, now people can realize that the kingdom of God is within, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, that there is no separation, right? That out there is not out there somewhere. It's always been within. And so that is what these godfathers of higher consciousness really are teaching, is that in waking up in our consciousness, that we are the ultimate creators of our destiny, of our reality. And that's why I feel that astrology is so helpful when you really study the greater picture of it and not just go into, just the archetypes or just the generalizations, or think because I have Mars and Leo, therefore I must blah, blah, blah. Like, no, right? But it's really helpful to see the operating system that you came in with. It's really helpful to see how, the relationship of our internal structure is helping us or hurting us. Another great teacher on YouTube, before I met Neville Goddard, who actually led me to Neville Goddard, is Tom Kieran. And he has a YouTube channel called Be Something Wonderful, where he basically teaches on a daily basis the teachings of Neville Goddard and some of the other teachers around this way of thinking, of really training our mind to create the internal structure in which we wish to see the world.
So when you work with clients, do you do the birth chart reading or the solar chart reading or the compatibility readings, right? Once you have that in place for them, or they are seeing that, how do you help them? And do you work with them or guide them beyond the reading?
No.
No,
I mean, I'm open to more readings, but I'm not a psychologist. That's why I love my psychologist. I have a fantastic psychologist, and it's just so wild because for a handful of years now, I've been conscious of my greater life lessons. I know my karma. I know what my soul is calling me to stretch into, but ask me if I was actually doing any of that until 2 minutes ago. I mean, like, 2 weeks ago. It's one thing to be aware
Yeah.
of your operating system. It's one thing to be aware of your karma and your wounds. It's one thing to be aware of what your soul is stretching into and asking you to evolve. But it is something completely else to participate in that growth. Because as Alice O. Howell says, the sacrifice of the ego is really painful. It's really painful. So it's not a cute process. It's really about a devotion to evolution and being of service and learning our lessons. And so I highly recommend psychology or just other methods for really integrating these life lessons. I mean, I can shine light on relationships within your psyche, or I can ask you, how is this showing up for you? Or do you relate to this? Or do you know this part of yourself? I can point you in directions where there is a lot of potential that maybe you're not maximizing that would come easily for you if you just gave it a little bit of attention. But I can't, I don't have the medicine psychologically to be with you on the path for integrating those lessons.
Yeah, and I guess really, I don't know. I mean, I think having a wonderful psychologist or psychotherapist or energy worker or any sort of healing, it depends, right? Because ultimately, it still is going to come back to us.
Mhm.
Ultimately, right? We can get all the information outside of ourselves that we want, and the integration and doing the work, or, I mean, I think of changing neural pathways in a
Mhm.
sense, right? Regulating your nervous system in order to embody something new. I mean, that's
So one,
I've been reading and talking forever, right? Hence Kim's work.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's a more doing. There's other things but there's doing, and then the EMDR and the EFT, the emotional freedom technique, right? It's all doing, but as you said, uh, letting go, releasing, surrender, it sounds like is behind all of that, right?
Absolutely. So one of the great tools and teachings that is the foundation of Deborah Silverman's course is the building blocks of astrology, which are the four natural elements. So mastery of the four natural elements, fire, earth, air, and water, is where magic comes from. It's really true. She describes these four natural elements, which show up in pretty much every tradition through ancient time, right? So this is not something that she necessarily created, right? But she's taking from all of these ancient traditions that really honor the four natural elements. And she describes it as four wheels on a vehicle. right? And ideally, you don't want a flat tire.
Right.
So she has a book called The Missing Element, and it's really great to understand which of the four is either lost, you just feel like you're not cultivating that element in your life. Um, and it's also very helpful to see if any one of these four elements are really taking over your life. So I'm happy to kind of talk through in
Oh,
English those four elements. And I will say that this is one way that I do help clients, right, on the path to applied astrology, is if you can locate where one of these four is off kilter, you can really start to create more homeostasis in your psyche, in your day-to-day life. And this is the beginning of living into the fullness of all 10 planets and all 12 signs. So this is where I started. So fire. So we're going to talk through fire, earth, air, and water. Fire is energy. Earth is practicality. Air is communication. And water is emotion. So to go a little bit deeper, when we're talking about fire, we're talking about get up and go. We're talking about passion. We're talking about humor. Where is the fun factor in your life? Are you cultivating fun? Are you having fun? Do you have the inspiration and motivation to move energy through your body, through dancing and exercise and singing? Earth, when we're talking about earth element, we're talking about work. We're talking about being of service and setting goals. So this has everything to do with food and just the material world for feeling safe and secure. The practicality in life. We're talking about air. We're talking, we're thinking, we're connecting with others. And so this element of communication really governs our relationships, how we are relating to others. And then finally, water is our feeling body, right? So our intuition, our gut instincts. This is our spirituality even. So this whole emotional realm of intuitive wisdom is the waters. So even just doing a self-survey as you reflect on these four parts of ourselves, you can start to ask yourself, do I have enough earth? Am I showing up for work? Am I arriving on time? Am I paying my bills? Is my house organized? Right? When I contemplate about air element, am I expressing my feelings? Right? Am I being honest? Am I speaking with radical truth? Am I asking questions? Am I staying curious about life? So there's so many great questions that you can ask yourself around these elements. I mean, even water, it's like, well, when was the last time you cried? Are you in touch with your emotional body? Do you follow your gut instincts? Does your intuition lead you, into a good place where you can trust yourself? So that's just one way to really navigate how to create the four wheels on the car moving forward and feel balanced. And when you look at your natal chart and those 10 planets, well, they all show up in a zodiac sign, and each zodiac sign is an element. And so you can kind of see what you came in with. Did you come in with 2 fire and 3 air, and however it lays out the configuration, so that if you're a person who answers, well, I don't even know the last time I cried, like I'm just not sure, and you see, well, I only came in with 1 planet in water or 0 planets in water, well, then maybe that's an indicator for how you've tended to process your experience without being really connected to your emotions. But it doesn't mean that you have to go through life emotionless. It means that you can consciously cultivate more water in your life. And how do you do that? In so many ways. I mean, drinking a cup of tea, you can connect with water. taking a bath, you can connect with water, going swimming, you can connect with water, sitting in meditation and slowing down, because regardless of how many planets you came in with water, you're a human being and you do have emotions. And so whether they get stuck or they feel frozen or they, go to the mind and they want to rationalize, it doesn't mean that you can't cry. It doesn't mean that you can't be in touch with your emotions. It just means you might need a few more tools to get there, which is something that you can do by waking up to the idea that I need to get some tools, right? As simple as, okay, say Earth is missing and you're like, I just can't clean my house. I just can't figure out how to organize my things or know where things are when I need them to be a certain place. And instead of, it's like some of the tools could be other people too. Having enough consciousness to just be like, all right, well, I would rather spend my energy in this way, but I can, you know, hire someone to come in and help in this area of my life so that I feel like I can check these boxes and I have my vehicle moving forward with all four wheels. So it's not that like, oh, we have to be brilliant at all these four things, which I think we can be to some extent. I think we can learn to cultivate these parts of ourselves, even when some of them feel a little bit more inaccessible. Because I have, right? I have a missing element of earth and I have figured it out. In a handful of years, I have cultivated more earth just through showing up for myself and saying, you know what? It's hard to be an adult because I identified so strongly with being a kid. But it doesn't mean that it can't be an adult, right? So that self-compassion and empathy, I think, is the first and best place to start as you're observing your nature, and then realizing that the whole world is at your fingertips and it's just about reaching for it. And that's why books like The Alchemist and The Magician's Way are two of my favorite books, because here's the thing, it's not about us being everything. That's not the point of this conversation. That's why there are so many different people. That's why there are so many different areas of life. We're not meant to be masters in all of them. But books like The Alchemist and The Magician's Way remind us to drop into our heart center. And the moment that you drop into your heart and you really hear the voice of your heart telling you what you truly desire in this lifetime, that, I feel like, regardless of what your natal chart says about you, if that desire is true for you, you can live into that. And through awareness, you can cultivate whatever you need on planet Earth and above and below and anywhere that you can find it to get what you need to fulfill your heart's desire. So that is, I would say, one helpful tip that I'll share with clients as we're going over their charts, whether it's in relationship to one another or the year ahead or to their internal structure that they arrived with, to feel like they can feel good about themselves.
Yeah, because otherwise the inner critic, right, could come in and start nitpicking or and I don't know who the inner critic would be in the zodiac sign. Maybe there isn't, right? I don't know.
There
Is
is.
there? So which
Yeah.
zodiac sign shows up as the inner critic? Because for me,
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, it's the inner critic. All that they get. I don't want to speak for everybody. I know that's where I can go, and so I'm amongst others, but I think that's a big one, and a lot of
Yeah.
many. The inner critic shows up as a positive, right? It's a good teacher, but if we cling to the inner critic's words of wisdom, then or whatever they got to say, it can keep us stuck from moving forward. Which one is it? I need to know. I'm gonna bang that one from my zodiac. My what table did the what table round table?
See, okay. So that's the pitfall, right? Is saying this sign is causing this
Right.
experience in me, therefore I want to banish this sign. But I'm going to introduce you to the inner critic. then I'm also going to introduce you to the full spectrum of where that energy even comes from so that you can fall back in love with that part of yourself and realize that it's actually trying to do you a grand service. Okay, so the inner critic in all of us, because it's not just you, is Virgo.
Virgo. Gosh, I love that Virgo.
We do love the Virgo. We do. It's mutable earth. So it's the second earth sign of the zodiac, and it comes into the material world. And it's like, okay, all this fixed earth of Taurus, we've got a lot of material possessions here. And we don't have a lot of good systems or organization, or how can we actually make this more efficient? So it arrives in the material world, and it wants to up level and perfect
Mm.
the material world. So it wants to clean it up. It wants to streamline it. And so ultimately, the intention of Virgo is to create health and wellness. It's the area of life that governs health and medicine, and also service. It really wants to be of service. This is Mother Teresa was a Virgo, right? And showed up every day and really gave so much. But at the end of the day, in her journals, after she passed away, it was read that she was journaling about not having done enough. Just like really feeling disappointed that, oh no, like everything I did wasn't good enough. And okay, so this is where the inner critic comes in, because it always wants to perfect more. It always wants to be healthier. It always wants to be more helpful, to be more of service, to make a greater impact. And so, yeah, that when the critical nature comes from good discernment, right, of how things could be better. But when it gets out of balance, and especially when it turns in on itself and becomes critical and starts to, create anxiety or worry about not having done enough or not being good enough or all of that, then it starts to hinder, right? But if we can appreciate the devotion of the prayerful, loving mother, like Mother Mary, right? That cosmic mother that is so devoted to Piscean energy across the chart from it, right? 180 degrees apart, this Piscean, unconditional love, spirituality, compassion, empathy. When the service can be in devotion to that, then there can be more balance between those two, right? And there can be a trust, right? So that fear can be dissolved through trust. And the beautiful thing is, at the end of the day, knowing that there's more to do allows you to show up and do more work tomorrow, which is the joy of like being of service. So there's that too. But is this helpful in the way, like your relationship with the inner critic, or would you like to speak to that a little bit
No, I
more?
mean, I think that's great. I mean, when you mention that it very much is. The inner critic shows up for me when it comes, specifically for me. Well, golly, body image issues, right? So then I might get on myself for eating certain foods or not, exercising enough. So when you refer to it that way, right, the intention is health and wellness, then it's illuminating,
Mhm.
right? Maybe, well, but if I sink into that, well, I already screwed up today, I could totally let it cave in on itself and just continue to lay around on the couch and eat the rest of the pint of ice cream, right? Or I could decide to get up because the inner critic's like, hey, get your 11,000 steps. You haven't walked them yet. And it's more encouraging, right? So I could see both sides of the coin when it comes to the inner critic and how it could if you let it, right? That's a consciousness. If you let it
Right.
take you down,
Mhm.
right? Or you let it be your guide.
Yeah. Yeah. And our Virgo nature really notices details. Okay, it does like the details because, you know, that's how things get organized and streamlined and all of these good things. But Deborah Silverman has a story of, you know, interviewing all of these Vogue supermodels and giving them readings and having conversations with them through the lens of astrology. And she just heard from each one of them, like their concept of their own beauty. And it's like they would be pointing out a mole, like something so tiny that no one else would actually notice or actually would think was quite beautiful, right? But they were like, no, but this mole lands like right here and it's just obstructing la la la. And I wish it just didn't, like, you know, and Deborah is just thinking, this is what you think is not pretty about you. Like, are you even kidding? Are you even kidding me? You know, like, so it's just funny, you know, because no straight lines exist in nature, right? So Taurus energy is fixed earth. It's just natural beauty, you know, there's no like trying to change it from its original form. But then Virgo comes in, it's like, how can we cut this tree trunk in a straight line and make, you know, a table, which is really great to have a table to eat your lunch on, right? So it is of service, but you know, straight lines are not natural. So perfecting earth is not necessarily natural. It doesn't mean that it's not good. It's just, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and Virgo, internal critic, does need to be careful about the way that it thinks about what is good, because it's not always super accurate. It's not always, yeah.
Okay, so Virgo, uh, you mentioned, Taurus being, but also material, right? Is that what you said, a material earth?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but a natural earth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you, I know this, when we think about the divine masculine, feminine essences, I guess, would you say each zodiac sign embodies both? If we're,
So when looking at the elements, earth and water are more feminine,
yeah,
and fire and air are more masculine.
okay, yeah. But not necessarily per se. So I guess when you're, oh yeah, because each zodiac sign is an element, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, or leans towards predominantly one element over another.
Yeah, but there's a nesting nature to femininity and masculinity as you go deeper and really study,
Mhm.
you know, because the final sign of the zodiac, or sorry, the final sign of the earth zodiac of the three earth is Capricorn, which is cardinal earth, and that's one of the father archetypes. So even though it's earth, right, which is more feminine, right, because it's earth and water is more feminine. Capricorn nature is more masculine. It's very Saturnian. It's one of like the grandfather's fathers
Hmm,
that creates discipline and structure.
interesting.
Mhm.
Golly, it's a lot to, God, a lot to uncover, and I feel like you've just shared a drop's worth of knowledge, right, in this enormous, vast bucket. I'm glad you're learning, digging into it, and I'm getting to just hear about it. And I want to have a natal chart. Uh, with everything you shared, it definitely, I think, would help and benefit so many to be able to navigate or their ebbs and flows in life.
Absolutely. It's my
Um,
favorite conversation to have is through the lens of astrology.
yeah, it makes me. I mean, there's so many areas where um, I think of too. Rudolf Steiner's. I think it his four temperaments. Are you familiar with his work?
I'm not. Mm-mm.
melancholic, choleric, sanguine, and phlegmatic. They're the four temperaments. And, he created the Waldorf school
Okay.
and the Waldorf, educational philosophy. And he sort of lumped every child into one. And they kind of assess that when the children first go. But you're not just one. You, right? You have all four.
Oh,
But what
God.
you lean towards, and choleric is fiery. I'm sure every Aries under the sun is probably choleric. I don't know that, but I am choleric, and I think both my kids are, and then you've got like I forget, phlegmatic is Eeyore, woe is me. And then kind of more sedentary. They lean toward they're bigger bone structured. And then you
Mhm.
have sanguine is like a butterfly or like Tigger, I think. Tigger hops, like and then you've got Pooh, who's just maybe he's sanguine. I forget. But it's, you're never just one. Um,
Can you hear how those relate to the four natural elements?
Goodness, let's see.
They do. I can name them, but go ahead. This is if
Did
you
you
want to
say,
name which one would be which.
phlegmatic earth?
Mm-mm.
No, shoot. Well, fire might be the Tigger, or let's see, you've got rabbit, right? No, come on. No, I need help.
Do you want the answer key? Okay, here we go. I don't know all your fancy words, but when you
So the
when you
phlegmatic,
phlegmatic, that's like the woe is me, the emotional one, that's definitely water.
right?
That's
Okay.
the trap of water, right? Getting stuck in the emotional body.
Yeah, yeah, Eeyore. Okay, that makes sense.
So that's water. Say your other fancy words.
Okay, choleric would be
Fire.
energy. Yeah, yeah.
Energy. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then your earth would be, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like, and then you've got piglet. I mean, because they kind of related them to those.
Cute.
I said sanguine. Hops around. Real, I don't want to say ADHD, but kind of.
The butterfly, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's definitely air. So that's the mental body that goes in every direction all at once.
Okay,
The
yeah.
scattered
Mhm.
and the relational, that is definitely air. And then the last one, the melancholic one, is definitely earth. All the work to do. Oh, life is so hard meeting these goals and showing up in the mundane. This is
Yeah,
earth speaking.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, that was fun.
yeah, but anyway, that when you really think about things, we have a little bit of all of it. It's just a matter
We do.
of the observer being able to see that, and
Mhm.
acknowledging that. And I think so often that's where our relationships show up. Um, they show up to help us illuminate, reflect
Mhm.
back to ourselves. Oh, I got that part. Yeah. Oh, I don't like that part in you. So I must have that in me. And that's, sometimes really hard to digest for people. Something that they don't like in another human is actually something that they too can recognize because they own that part or are disconnecting from that part, and they need to connect with that part
I
in a
do
healthy
agree.
way.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. Our relationships are our greatest teachers. And the things that trigger us are coming up for healing. I really believe that if we're actually being triggered by something, it's because we're ready to face the healing potential there is there. Um, yeah, the life as a reflection of our inner world. It's a really hard concept to embrace, right? That other people's behavior in relationship to you is reflecting something internal within yourself. These are hard concepts to wrap your head around, right? I'm not talking about just tragedy. That's not what I'm necessarily talking about, right? But day-to-day dynamics. Yeah.
Yeah, that you've literally asked for it. I mean, in a sense, subconscious.
I don't believe that we are the victim of the world we see. I think that we are co-creators with the world that we experience.
Yeah, so you've asked for it. Kind of. Creating it, some part of your conscious has created that part. No?
Yeah, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that, yeah, we are showing up to learn all of these lessons in beautiful and difficult ways. And the more that we wake up to our power in it all,
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily become easier, but there's a lot more empathy and compassion along the way, which makes it much more approachable and
Yeah.
possible.
I mean, I believe that we choose our parents.
So the way that Deborah Silverman breaks this down, she's like, Saturn is a huge planet in her astrology. Oh, it's a huge planet in astrology. It's all about giving us our biggest life lessons.
Okay.
So she describes this as before we arrived in this lifetime, we sat down and had a conversation with Saturn, and Saturn gave us a contract and spelled out in this upcoming lifetime, you are there to learn these two really big things, maybe three, but really two. Okay. And I'm not going to tell you exactly how that's going to play out, what it's going to look like, exactly how it's going to feel. But I need you to just, if you agree to this, I need you to sign right there on the dotted line that you are up for this soul challenge to go to Earth and learn these really big life lessons. And we joyfully were like, yep, I want to go down there for this reason. Like, I'm going to go figure out how to learn this. And we signed it. So, like Deborah says, nobody pushed you on the bus, right? You did choose to be here. Now, did you choose your exact parents? Maybe not, but you did choose what you would gain and what you would learn from that relationship, as beautiful or painful as it turned out to be.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Essentially, that would be my takeaway from, either the belief that you choose your parents specifically, or, I remember thinking, Rudolf Steiner, that's another thing. Rudolf Steiner Theosophy would say you choose your parents based on the soul lessons you need.
Exactly. That's it.
Whatever it is you've come to learn, you end up in space with the parents and the siblings and the people and your soul cluster of individuals and of other souls that you need for your soul's growth.
Yeah.
So, and it was really when I read that, and then I read Caroline Miss's Sacred Contracts book, having these sacred contracts with people or other souls.
Yes.
Golly, I mean,
Mm.
my life changed for one, and you definitely, like, it was much easier for me to step into compassion with both parents in particular, right? Because up until then, I was a victim of my childhood, and that's not the reality. And so it was helpful. It was, I feel like over the years I've been given these like very specific either book titles or messages that have been so clear,
Beautiful.
and they just, resonated in my cells, bones, nothing that anything could be, uh, you know, um, articulated with words. This was not something that I needed. It just felt like so deep in my body. I'm like, oh, doesn't matter if this is exactly, but this has allowed me some great shifts, these different things that popped up along the way. Definitely three or four, like, I walked into a library and saw one book, right? That shifted my life like forever. just,
Mhm.
and so, anyway, and that was one of them, the sacred contracts. It's like, oh, I needed all these people, these souls, right? They are giving me exactly what I need.
Mhm.
Anyway, it was, I don't know, but I know that we could probably talk for hours, and I want to learn so much more. I know there, and we just talked about Virgo essentially. I mean, we talked about multiple, but Virgo being the inner critic and Pisces being the unconditional loving, right?
Mhm.
They all, I would love to know about the rest of them, but, and like they're big when you break it down into this, like, I don't know, the parts of your psyche. But to honor your time, I think this would be a great time to close our conversation. So, where can people find you if they want to have a reading or learn more?
Yeah, you can email me. My email is my first and last name at Gmail. So that's Nicky Hilsen at Gmail.
Okay.
Nicky short for Nicole.
Nicky Hilsen at gmail.com. So you can find Nikki and learn more about her work and, uh, have a reading done by her, any one of those three readings. And then, learn maybe how to navigate or bring awareness through a new lens to help you unleash, liberate, and live out your pure potential.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, likewise.